Welcome to Hard Talk from Ramallah. I'm Stephen Sackur. More than 5 decades after the Israeli occupation of the West Bank began, I've come here not to meet a Palestinian politician, but an artist, perhaps the most renowned Palestinian artist of his generation, Suleiman Mansour. His paintings have come to define a sense of Palestinian identity. But in a place like this, in troubled times like these, does art really matter?
I have a vision of what the painting should look like at the end, and I keep trying until I have that image, and it doesn't come usually in the first instance. So this is the first try I do it, and the effect is should show the helplessness of people and so on. That's how I want this painting to be. But now this is how I feel personally, and how I think people are feeling.
This is dark, this is bleak. The mood, the feel of your paintings has really changed, hasn't it?
Changed a lot. A big difference between these figures and the figures of the heroic people that I used to do in the 70s and 80s. And it depends on the situation, the political situation. I hope it will change another time. So that, because I love to make heroic paintings, to reach again that feeling of being hopeful and optimistic.
Suleiman Mansour, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
I want to begin at the beginning. You grew up with conflict, you grew up with loss, you grew up with very difficult family circumstances. Your father died when you were young. So I'm intrigued to know, why painting? Why art? What drew you to it?
I had a kind of talent. This is one part of it. The other part is all this hard life that made me kind of lonely. And loneliness gives you time for yourself to work on your talent and so on. So I was painting when I was like 5, 6 years old, and I couldn't leave the paint and the paper and so on.
And also, I'm intrigued by the timing, because you were born just 1 year before the creation of the State of Israel, which of course had a huge impact upon the lives of all Palestinians. And then through your adolescence and early adulthood, you then experienced the run-up to the '67 war, and then the occupation by the Israeli military of East Jerusalem and the West Bank. And of course, East Jerusalem is where you were living. What impact did that have upon you? Did you see your future and your commitment in a different way?
You have so many armies around you, and they are fighting, and I was sure that Palestine will be liberated.
You felt that?
I felt that very strongly, listening to the Arab media, especially Egyptian media, and it was a shock for me and for all the people when we were occupied. I think at that time we didn't think that the Israelis will stay. We thought they will stay like a couple of years, and then they will have a kind of solution, and then they go, and that's it. At that time also we didn't feel so much Palestinians, and because all the childhood, adolescent was we were Jordanian.
You were under Jordanian rule.
Yeah, and we felt like Jordanians. And this feeling of being a Palestinian, it came little by little after the Israeli occupation.
But projecting your artistic vision of what a Palestinian identity was, does that make you a political artist? Does it even at times make you a propagandist?
Sometimes, maybe at times, yeah, but all artists, musicians, literature people, they were affected by the political developments around. And for me, I wanted to paint. And what I felt I can't paint a flower or I can't paint a nude figure, and that's it. I'm an artist, I have a message.
But that's interesting. You mean you didn't ever feel that you could seek out and express beauty for its own sake? It always had to have a cause behind it, did it?
Yes.
Always?
Always, yeah. And I remember in 1980, an Israeli officer called me and another two colleagues to his office, and he said, "Why are you painting political paintings? Why don't you make a nice flower? Why don't you paint a nude figure? And I will buy from you." So from that time, I thought this is a bad idea to make a flower or a nude figure or anything like that. And I think my time is precious, and I want to, if I want to do something, it has to have a message.
But does it have to have truth? Because if we look at your paintings, generally your images are very positive, heroic images of steadfast Palestinians. Is that really the truth of the way Palestinians always are? Or is it more a sort of propaganda notion to help the cause?
Part of it, yes. Another part is that I want to make the kind of idealistic idea of the Palestinian land or Palestinian people, and I paint what I want people to be, not what they are. You know, I don't paint realistic ideas about life and people. You know, like if I make Jerusalem, I take off many things from the roofs. I make it a beautiful city. I try to make it idealistic.
Something very striking about your work is what happened during the first Intifada in the late 1980s when you and a group of other artists got together. I think you called it your New Visions movement, and you declared that you would no longer buy art supplies, canvases, paints from Israel, that you would be defiant, you would create your own materials for your own Palestinian art as part of the resistance.
Yes, and it wasn't actually our idea. It was the idea of the first Intifada, to rely on ourselves and to boycott Israeli products. And we as artists, we said, why don't we use the same? Why don't we do the same? So each one started to search for a material that fits his personality, and
which brings us back to the soil, to the land.
Yes, and it also brings us back to the childhood period where I used to help my grandmother doing things from mud, like walls or ovens. And so immediately when I thought about a material that I will work with, so I came with the idea of the mud. I used to mix with it hay, straw, and color it with henna, with natural materials, and then I started doing mud alone, you know.
Thing is, you still do it today. In fact, one of the things you're best known for around the world is your work in this clay that you put on wood, not on canvas, but on wood. And sometimes you incorporate it with paint, sometimes it's entirely a sort of clay vision. But you don't need to do it anymore. What is it about working with clay that you still enjoy, even though you're no longer at a place where you're boycotting art materials?
I like the cracks in the mud, and the cracks symbolizes a kind of feeling, not only with me, but with the Palestinian people in general. There is a kind of hope is lost, you know, in a way. And people are desperate, and they feel frustrated, and also the checkpoints that we have, hundreds of checkpoints here and there. It like separated people from each other.
Sort of fragmentation.
Fragmentation of the society. Fragmentation of the idea of Palestine, fragmentation of hope. So that's why I still work with mud, and I like the cracks in the mud, which symbolizes all these feelings.
I just wonder, when we look at that huge canvas behind you, which is so much about heroic struggle and heroic individuals in Palestine, do you feel, in a way, a little embarrassed by it, that it projects images which don't really match today's reality?
Yeah, in a way, but I wanted to represent a certain time, from 1948 until 1992, through this painting, including the diaspora, including the occupation, including the resistance, and then the Intifada, and then just before the Oslo agreements, the hope was very high or very strong among Palestinians, and I wanted to represent that period, to represent it not only through figures and so on, but also through the spirit of the time.
Talk to me about the experience, the personal experience of being an artist, living through Palestinian history of the last 50 years. Have you known fear? Fear coming from your art and the position it put you in with the Israelis?
No, not really. I remember in 1981, I was imprisoned for a short time. But then the interrogator called me, and he wanted to interrogate with me.
But why did they imprison you in the first place?
No reason. No reason. I was going with my family to Nablus with the car, and then I was photographing villages on the road. And they stopped me, and they took me, and they took the camera and the film, and I stayed like 2 weeks in the prison. And then when after a while, he asked me, "Who you think you are? You know, everybody is writing about you, that you are in prison. Who the hell are you?" I think they were afraid of taking to prison to prison a famous person, especially in culture and art and so on. As
did they ever try to take any of your canvases, your pictures, or
many. Not only me, but every exhibition that we made in Ramallah or in Nablus and so on, we have soldiers coming in and taking paintings that they don't like. And the problem is they don't have a rule, you know. So if you have like a kind of left-wing soldier come in, then the paintings are left there, you know. But a right-wing soldier comes in, then half of those are empty. We have in 1981, I think, or 81, they made a rule that we can't paint with red, green, black, and white.
The colors of the Palestinian flag.
The colors of the Palestinian flag. And so every artist was painting with red, green, black, and white.
Let me ask you this. Maybe it sounds like a stupid question, but do you think, looking back on your long career, that your art, your voice, your expression may have taken a different path if you were not Palestinian, if you hadn't been born into conflict and hostility and this desire to express something about your people and their struggle?
I'm sure I will be a different artist, I'm sure.
And do you feel in a way that your situation has trapped you as an artist?
Yeah, sometimes I feel I'm trapped, but also I think I used it in a way because making political art and sometimes it comes out real truthful from your inside. And sometimes you just want to make a nice Palestinian painting to sell it. I did that. And many artists did that also. It's like using the situation you are in, although you are trapped in it.
Interesting you talk about selling art, because of course you're a professional artist, you have to make a living, you have to make money. For example, your most famous work, probably, is that one known as The Camel of Hardship, which actually you painted several times, one of which was bought by Gaddafi because he loved it and it ended up being destroyed, but you painted it again, and I believe the later painting was sold in Dubai for $250,000. But the subject was, again, it was an old man bearing the burdens, the steadfast Palestinian, and it weaved in themes about Jerusalem and loss and all sorts of things. When it sold for that much money, did it make you feel strange?
Not strange, you know, but happy maybe. But I know that it's a unique painting and a unique subject. And it's very famous, and I don't think every painting I do will be sold in that amount. But this painting, I knew it will be sold for much money, and I wasn't surprised. It's very hard to make value with art. Only the dealers and gallery people who sometimes I work with, and they have a lot to do with that.
Let me ask you about Israelis. You know, we've talked about Israelis in your life experience being soldiers who've raided your exhibitions or who once briefly put you in prison. But you've come to know Israeli artists too. Have you actively sought out collaboration with Israeli artists? Does that seem something important to you, or do you find that very difficult?
It depends on the time. Like in from 80 until 2004, I think, we were in very good relationship, and we made lots of joint exhibitions. more than 30, 35 exhibitions together. Most of them under the big title of Down with the Occupation and for a two-state solution and so on. Yeah, today it's impossible to make a joint exhibition or to meet in Ramallah, or it's very hard, but I hope things will change.
And what of pressures from the Palestinian side? Over recent years, we've seen Hamas, for example, in power in Gaza, not in the West Bank, but in Gaza, but clearly there are divisions within the political life of the West Bank as well, and there are hardliners who take a very tough stand on any relations with Israel. Do you feel those pressures from inside Palestine too? There are perhaps voices saying that you have been too close to Israelis, you've been too cooperative. And I wonder if that worries you, that trend.
For a short while, yes. Somebody wrote in newspapers and other wrote in a magazine and so on. And you felt that people in general are against these activities now. Because now it's hopeless. I mean, they feel that the Israelis are using these exhibitions to whitewash the occupation and to tell the whole world, look, nothing, there is no problem here, artists are working together. And
it's difficult when you say there is no chance of peace, it's hopeless now. It's difficult for me then to look again at your own art, which is so full, much of it, of hope and idealism. Have you lost that? Are you a very different artist today, do you think, from the man who painted some of these very famous images going back to the 70s and 80s?
Of course, I am a different artist today. It's just I can't make heroic paintings like I used to do. I can't paint a nice landscape because everything is destroyed. People are depressed. They are not like the people in the 70s and the 80s. They are different. They are very much concerned with living, with money and so on. Landscape is destroyed by settlements, by buildings and so on.
And do you, given all of that you see and feel around you today, do you ever think to yourself, I don't want to paint anymore?
No, I didn't reach that situation yet, but it's a thing that I did for so many years and I can't do anything else. And I come every day to my studio and I make it a point to come to my studio. Even if I don't paint or if I don't do any kind of art, I just sit and read a book or drink coffee and so on. But I make it a point that I should come here every day for several hours.
That's your life.
That's my life, my studio, my work, and every now and then I make a painting. But I don't think I will reach that point where I say no, I don't want to paint anymore or to stop painting.
Well, we thank you for inviting us into your studio today. Thanks very much for being on HARDtalk. It's a real pleasure to be here and to see some of your work.